We were about 1 year away from the World Cup in 2022 in Qatar, and it seems like things are sort of getting set with the U.S. men's national team lineup. We have a core group of players, and it seems like there's not a lot of room for players to get introduced. But on the other hand, everything we know about the national team in the last 2 or 3 years is that new players come along and impact the team on a regular basis. So with that being said, I brought in a man who has his finger on the pulse of, especially whenever it comes to the youth players in the U.S. men's national team. And I want to know from Filippo, we're going to discuss what players can impact the national team at every position. First of all, Filippo, how you doing, man? I know you just you're recovering from injury right now.
Yeah, I had to take a time off work and everything because I got a knee surgery. I'm all fixed up. Just I put my foot on the ground, but feeling much better. I want to talk about one upgrade from our last video here. No
The
white
flag. The most iconic white wall in all of U.S. soccer YouTube has been replaced by a flag.
It's coming back. It's coming back. Don't worry. I'm bringing it back.
Right.
I'm bringing sexy back. Don't worry.
All right, good. So let's start with the premise, Filippo. Would you agree that over World Cup qualifying especially, we've kind of developed a core group of players that are sort of forming the base of the national team, which is something that we didn't have, say, 6 months ago?
Yeah, I think we have the spine, right, ready. I would say probably 14, 15 players there that I wouldn't say it's a lock. A lot of things can happen, but there's a good like 14 to 15 players that you can't see the roster without them right now. Right now. We know things can change, and we've seen how much it changed lately. But yeah, I agree.
All right, well, let's jump into the defense, and I'll let you go first. And right now, I'm assuming that our four center backs that are really getting most of the run right now are John Brooks, Chris Richards, Walker Zimmerman, and Miles Robinson. And then at the fullback positions, we're all feeling pretty good about Serginho Dest and Anthony Robinson. Do you think there's a player out there, or a player that I just mentioned, that can start eating up a lot of minutes and having a big impact on the national team by the time we get to the 2022 World Cup?
So the easy answer is one we're going to agree on very easily. It's Joe Scally is the easy answer, right? Emerging in Bundesliga, still very young, but we've been talking about him for months at this point. I think 3 months since he started to start for.
Yeah.
And let me try to do this. Borussia Mönchengladbach.
And he hasn't missed a game. He started every single game for him. It's like incredible. I'm not sure we have a more consistent player in all of Europe right now than Joe Scally.
Yeah, and many will say that he benefited from the injuries that they had early on. And yes, he did, but he also grabbed the opportunity, right?
Yeah, that's how it works. That's how most players in Europe get opportunities, is through like injury or some type of wild thing goes on. They get the opportunity. And
how many 18-year-olds just start in Bundesliga?
Not a lot,
many,
man.
Right? It's not even that many in MLS. It's not easy in any professional league. They got to understand these are 18-year-olds playing against grown men, 25, 26, 27 experienced men, and he's starting. But I'm going to let you talk about Scally more. The player I wanted to talk about is Jonathan Gomez. And we've seen him in USL. He was very good for Louisville. But yes, and I know some people get mad when I say this, but the league the player plays does matter when you're judging the overall ability. What he does in one league doesn't mean he can do it in a high level. But he definitely showed enough promise to get a contract with Real Sociedad. He's going to be playing with Real Sociedad's B team now, which plays at La Liga 2, which we brought Shaq Moore from La Liga 2, and not a big fan, but it wasn't like he was bad. So we'll see how he does there, Jonathan Gomez. And we talk about how the left back position, Anthony Robinson, has been having ups and downs, especially last camp, right? We're talking before we started the episode. And when it comes to the backup, it doesn't seem like we really have a lock-in backup. George Bello didn't really convince anyone. Sam Vines seems to be the most reliable one there in the sense of he's not going to hurt us, but it doesn't seem like he adds much to the team. So I think Jonathan Gomez, from a year from now, depending on how he goes in Real Sociedad, does well in La Liga 2, maybe gets a first-team minutes eventually, he could be a name that could pop up if we beat Mexico too, right? there's don't forget to say that, guys. He is a dual national, and we could also lose him. But I think Jonathan Gomez is a guy that, if we're going to make a bold prediction, he could be our backup left back for the World Cup. And then I'll let you talk about Joe Scally, which can also be our backup for the left back in the World Cup.
Yeah, we mentioned before the video that Anthony Robinson did not have a very impressive window. And coming off some windows where he looked phenomenal, all of a sudden he sort of fell off a cliff in terms of playing with the ball at his feet and just making a lot of mistakes. Mistakes that we saw from him earlier with the national team were back in full force, and that's scary. It's a good thing to know that you have Joe Scally waiting in the wings who can potentially come through. But as you said, he is a right footer playing left back, and I know you don't like that very much. He seems to be effective playing for Mönchengladbach. I just kind of flexed on you right there with the Mönchengladbach, but yeah,
Borussia, not Dortmund.
I think I think the young player from Louisville that would be tremendous if he opts to go with us. And do you think that within a year he can get in position where he could potentially like threaten for the national team, pass up a player like Sam Vines?
It's a bold prediction, right? But let's put it into perspective. Why do I think that? Joe Scally arrived in Germany in January, and he was with the B team of Borussia, not Dortmund, which I'm not going to, after you said it correctly, I'm not even going to try anymore.
Yeah.
He came in 6 months, and then he got the opportunity, and now he's getting this stretch now in earning a spot in the national team, even getting called up and maybe even minutes. So if Jonathan Gomez can do something similar, he does have a shot because we don't have a clear backup. That is the main reason. Now, it will be on a short notice, right? Because he's going to have the season right now, these 6 months with Real Sociedad B. And then after the summer, maybe he'll be with their first team. But by then, I think Greg will pretty much have his Qatar list like September. The call-up for the World Cup, again, assuming we make it, which I believe both of us agree that we believe we're going to make it. Because we need to make that disclaimer because people are going, we didn't qualify yet. We're aware of that, but we believe.
Disclaimer, I feel so much better after the playoff selection about our opportunity to make it. Because essentially, if we're top four, and we're pretty much going to be top four, we have a very good chance to make it. But go on, I'm sorry.
I agree with that. And we just want to make sure, yes, we are both aware we're not qualified, but we're both very confident we're going to qualify. So assuming we do, I think by September, Greg will have probably his list ready. So I don't know if Jonathan Gomez explodes or has a fantastic first half of 2022, 2023 season, if that'll be enough to get him in the roster. But if we're very thin there, I wouldn't be surprised, right? And injuries too, let's say Sam Vines is injured or Robbins is injured. He could be a player that could impact there. But yeah, because it's so close at this point, we're less.
Yeah, it's very tight.
We're less than
we've seen
from the games.
We've seen how long it's taken Joe Scally to integrate into the squad, despite starting out really hot. Now, one player who maybe 6 months ago we would have thought would have been in this list, but just has not started out hot at all with this club is Bryan Reynolds. He's a player that got to Roma and has just he's iced, man. He's not getting minutes, and the minutes that he's gotten have not looked good. Now, there's a lot of conversation about Reynolds potentially getting moved out or getting a loan coming into this winter window. What do you think Bryan Reynolds can potentially impact this right back slot?
Eventually, for the U.S. men's national team, yes. 2022, it's looking unlikely. Because the data we have right now, right? We don't know what's going to happen to him. And those are the good and the bad of moving abroad early, right? You can do like Scally and get in the highest level and compete and be getting minutes and improving every game. Or you can have something like Bryan Reynolds, which is what worries me about Pepe, which maybe we'll talk about later in the video. It's him going abroad. Is it going to be like Scally? He's going to come up big and develop quick, or Busio too, and even Tessman, which we're going to mention as well. Or go like Bryan Reynolds, which kind of just fell off the pole right now. And at this point, when you look at Reynolds, it's like, oh, wait, for short term, maybe it would have been better if he stayed in MLS for short term. Long term, he might learn from this and improve. Hopefully, fingers crossed he does. But 2022, what do you think? I think it's not looking likely.
It doesn't look likely, man. I don't know. I mean, considering how difficult it is to get into the national team at this point, like he would have to pass up some players that are playing a lot and or have performed well for the national team. So he'd have to get in a good situation and really hit the ground running. And from what we've seen from him at Roma, it doesn't look like he can do that. Let me move on to my player from the defense that I think is going to impact the lineup. And it's a player I don't think people are going to be very excited about, but I think it's a player that is definitely going to impact the team. And that's – go ahead.
Okay, let's see if I get this right, all right? And everyone that's watching the video, comment down below. Let's see if you can guess too. Are you going to say Aaron Long?
I'm gonna say Aaron Long, man. Clearly, Aaron Long was a center back for the national team before he got injured. He was starting just about every game he was eligible for. And after the injury, we've seen a lot of players come in and play well. But in the last window, we saw Greg Berhalter brought in Aaron Long just to be a part of the group. So clearly, he values this guy. And to be fair, I do wonder what Aaron Long would have looked like if he would have been part of the qualifying group, because he's a very fast and physical and aerial dominant player, and we saw Walker Zimmerman come in and play effectively, and he's a very aerial dominant player. He's not quite as athletic as Aaron Long. Maybe I don't know, who would you say has better distribution out of Long and Zimmerman? I don't know, but but Miles Robinson is maybe a player with a little bit better distribution than Aaron Long, but he's been phenomenal throughout qualifying. So I wonder if Aaron Long can come in and look a lot like Miles Robinson in the defense and potentially unseat one of these defenders, because even though we're pretty sure about maybe John Brooks or Chris Richards or Walker Zimmerman, John Brooks, Berhalter didn't bring him in the last window. Chris Richards is struggling for starting minutes with his club. Walker Zimmerman is just like all the other MLS defenders, is about to hit this break where none of the MLS players are going to be playing for a few months. So it could be an open competition whenever Aaron Long recovers from injury.
Yeah, I always rated Long ahead of Zimmerman, in my opinion. But we got to see how Aaron Long is going to return. Could he impact the team if he comes back? Yes. Me personally, I don't hide my opinion. I still would love to see us make a John Brooks and Chris Richards defense work. I think they're more ball-playing defenders than the other options in that sense. We can go ahead and talk about their marking skills, right? Miles Robinson's athleticism, physicality. Walker Zimmerman also's physicality and man marking might be better than some of them, might not. But in terms of ball-playing defenders, if you want to control possession, if you want to disorganize the opponent with the ball, John Brooks, we've seen at Wolfsburg, his long passes are fantastic. His distribution is very good. Struggles in isolation. I don't disagree with that. Struggled in camp in September, but has been good for us in the past as well. Chris Richards as well. From a ball-playing standpoint, much better. Now, Aaron Long, it's very possible. We got to see how he returns, right? It was an Achilles injury. Those are nasty to come back from.
Yeah, especially for an explosive athletic player.
Yeah, those are nasty to come back from. If he comes back the same as he was before, I could see him getting ahead of Walker Zimmerman, even though Zimmerman has been pretty damn reliable for the United States. I could see it, and clearly Greg does rate Aaron Long as he's already trying to integrate him, at least with the group. One name I wanted to just throw out there, too, that many people were mentioning is Cameron Carter-Vickers, right? They've been talking about him. He's been playing well for Celtic. I personally haven't been following Celtic enough, so if someone is watching it, they'll have a better opinion. But the problem I always had with Cameron Carter-Vickers is, again, he's also not really a ball-playing defender. And in that sense, if I criticize Zimmerman for it, I do have to say, hold my same standard for Cameron Carter-Vickers, right? Relies a lot on his physicality, works in the championship, English championship, which when DK was there, we saw how the championship is. Physical players thrive in that league. But I hold the same standard for them. He's not really a ball-playing defender, in my opinion. I don't know if that changed.
And he's not very tall either. I mean, comparative, like for an American center back, he's not very tall. For a Mexican center back, he might be like a giant, but for an American center back, not very tall. Let's move on to the midfield. So in the midfield, we saw the MMA midfield come through and really just be the gold standard for the national team right now. But beyond the MMA midfield, things are, precarious. We saw in the Jamaica game, whenever we lost Weston McKennie and brought in Gianluca Busio, the midfield was just not nearly as dominant as it was against Mexico. We know that Tyler Adams has long been held in this esteem as the most important national team player that we have, that the team plays much differently with Tyler Adams on the field than without. Behind Tyler Adams, we're still going with Kellen Acosta, which I think is a big upgrade over Jackson Ewell, which was the backup for a while. But still, there's a big fall off when Tyler Adams is not on the field. And after Musa and maybe Busio, I mean, we still have this. We still have Sebastian Lletget, who's getting regular call-ins. We still have Luca De La Torre is kind of out there in the wilderness, and maybe Christian Roldan, although we've not really seen him play in that position. What midfielder do you think can come into this lineup, or maybe it's a player that's already in this lineup that can impact this national team as we move towards the 2022 World Cup?
So for 2022, unless someone makes a huge jump, like Busio or someone I'm about to mention as well, regardless of who it is, I think the downgrade from Adams to that player at the 6 will be big. Unless someone makes a huge jump out of nowhere, which I don't think there's enough time. So one player I think personally is, we can talk about many different players that can play in the 6. Busio is one that can play in the 6. Venezia did put him, I believe, the last game. It didn't go very well at the 6. There is defensive issues. Busio has a couple problems on defense. Sometimes ball watching, sometimes the tracking back is not the best, not as physical as you would want the 6 to be.
Not very aggressive.
Not very aggressive.
Yeah.
It's the awareness too. Sometimes it seems like he hesitates to go press or tackle, and the tackles aren't strong enough to clear.
No.
Last game, I think Atalanta the first goal was when he cut a ball. He took the ball from a forward, but it wasn't strong enough, and the ball came to the Atalanta player, and they scored. Sometimes you need to learn that, and I think he'll learn it. He's still 19, and he's still growing. It seems like he's still growing. One player I think that could impact that and resolve the backup 6 issue is a player that's also struggling in and out of the starting 11, and defensively, I also didn't think he was very good the past 2 games for Venezia. It's Tenor Tessman. I think by the time Qatar comes, if Tenor continues to play in the Serie A and develop, he does have amazing athleticism. I don't think he's bad on the ball as well. I think he's more technical than Acosta and more athletic than Acosta and bigger. Mm-hmm. He's a bigger player. He's a big player. So is he going to be a player that we won't have a downgrade from Tyler Adams to Tessman? Absolutely not. It will be a downgrade, right? Tyler is older, much more, and Tenor might never reach that level, even though Tyler, to be fair, has been making a few mistakes here and there that have been bothering me. Mm-hmm. I think Tenor could be a player that could be the backup 6 for Qatar. Will it happen? I don't know. There's other players that we need to keep an eye on. We might go with Acosta all the way. That might be it. Definitely worries me a little bit with Acosta, because you almost have to change how you play when you play with Acosta. If we go back to Gold Cup, we observed how Greg changed the way we played, and then we started to play a little better in the playoffs. And look at me giving credit to Greg. Because of Matt Turner and Acosta, both's lack of ability to play on the ball, which, to be fair, Turner's a goalkeeper. I expected more from Acosta. We stopped trying to play out of the back. So if you're going to go with Acosta, I know maybe Stefan we could, but if you're going to play with Acosta, it kind of changes that dynamic. Or maybe you're going to have Yunus Musa drop and be the guy in the build-up, or Giovanni Reina maybe playing in the midfield, which is not ideal maybe for him to drop. You want Reina more close to the final third. But I think Tenor Tessman could be that. And if Tenor Tessman develops, I think we would agree him being the backup 6 could have a major impact for us, because Tyler plays as a holding midfielder. So he says he could get a yellow card and 2 yellow cards and get suspended, a red card. And he's been unreliable in terms of injury in the past. This year he's been good with that, but in the past that has happened to Tyler. So I think that's what worries me. And I think Tenor Tessman could be the solution there, without forgetting to give a shout out as well to my friend Johnny Cardoso too, starting to slowly pick up some steam for Internacional here and there in the lineup. Hopefully we see him in the December camp. And with that said, I want to hear your player there, because I'm talking to him.
I really like Tyler Tessman. I've been high on him for a little while, and not so much because of the way that he's playing right now, but just because he's in this position where I'm not sure that we have any other midfielders that are in a position to really be in striking distance for the national team. Like, realistically, what would Luca De La Torre have to do to get on the national team? Like, hey, can he play better than he's playing right now? I don't know. And if it's not good enough right now, then I don't know if it's not good enough. Like Johnny Cardoso, what would he have to do to get on the national team? At this point, he would either have to lock down a starting role for his club and be like really integral to what they're doing, or get a move to Europe and start playing regularly there. Tenor Tessman is in a position where he's already on this team in Europe. So all he realistically has to do is start getting regular minutes for his club. And he's in a position with his club where his club is not a wealthy club that can just go out and buy players left and right, that whenever they buy a player, they're investing in them and they expect to get something out of them. They put some money behind Tenor Tessman, so they are invested in him. It's not the same scenario as like Bryan Reynolds at Roma, where Roma has the money to kind of, waste it on a player. It's not like Manchester City or, any of these major clubs that like Matt Miazga when he went to Chelsea, they kind of gave him a few minutes and then, that was it for him. With Tanner Tessman, they're invested in Tanner Tessman. They want to see him succeed. And so much of what we see from Tanner Tessman right now, where it's not good, is game awareness and tactical awareness, and what better place to learn the game and to learn, like, especially the defensive side of the game than the Serie A in Italy, in a club that's wants to stay up. So I think he's in a wonderful opportunity to improve a lot of the areas where he needs to improve.
One thing I noticed too is sometimes when I see Tanner Tessman playing, it's something I never heard anyone say, and I never said this actually in soccer. He almost seems too innocent at times when he's playing. Did you get that feeling?
I always compare him to Bambi. I feel like he looks like Bambi out there.
Oh, with the like deer, if the head. What do you mean?
No, like a deer that like just is kind of still growing into its body and it's kind of like uncoordinated and clumsy. Like he's a big guy, but he doesn't always play like a big guy on the field.
Seems innocent. Seems like the other players are just a little bit smarter. In Brazil, we call the other players are more malandro. They're just like kind of like street smart, and they're just that's what it gives me vibes. It's not really a talent problem. Now, is he the solution for long term? I don't know. I just think for Qatar, because of what you pointed out, the situation he's in, they're going to keep playing him.
Yeah.
And he's going to improve. And he actually, from the first performances, he already looks better.
Yeah, he does.
More comfortable. So I think because of the situation he's in, he has an advantage over De La Torre is not really a 6, even though he's been playing as a dual 6. It's not really where I think Greg would play him. But Johnny, we don't know. He has to lock in. He has to, a bare minimum, be a lock-in starter for Internacional. Acosta, as of now, he's going to continue to start for the Rapids. I think he's going to stay there and play it safe. And then there's not that many other options. I mean, I've mentioned maybe us trying, since if we don't have Adams, try Yunus Musa at the 6. I don't know how that would go. I just want to see it. I don't think it would be terrible by any means, even though defensively he does lack awareness as well. It seems like these young players, they're not as focused on defense for the full 90 minutes. That's what it's been showing evidence. And we're getting that experience because we've got so many young players in the team. We start to see these ups and downs throughout the games. And then you see some of the more veteran players more focused, like Tyler Adams, even though he's kind of young as well. Weston McKennie, a little bit more consistent. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with Tanner Tessman for this one because I think because of what you point out, the scenario, I think he could be the backup 6 when World Cup comes. But one thing I want to say in this video, which we should have said it earlier, Sam, a lot of these changes might not happen because Greg has shown us that he's very slow to change. He takes his time and he goes so. And when it comes to the World Cup, which is the end goal, right, he might be reluctant to take some risks in regards to that, and he might just play it safe. Even if Tanner Tessman is playing a lot for Venezia, he could just go, Acosta has been here with me the whole time. He knows how I want to play. I know what Acosta can do. I'm just going to bring Acosta. So Greg, that's something we do need to mention, that a lot of these changes we're mentioning, it's not really Greg-like to just change quickly.
Yeah, the only thing there is it's a year away. So if Tessman does end up in a position where he's a game-in, game-out starter for a Serie A club, like that's a pretty tough resume to turn down, even if you're Greg and you're pretty reliant on. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Now, one thing I want to say about Tanner Tessman, I feel like nobody gives him credit for how quick his feet are. Like, there's been a number of times where I remember in the Olympic qualifying tournament, whenever he came on, and he only got a few minutes at the end of that tournament. I think we were playing Panama in that game that we lost. He came on at the end, and there was this little moment where he had like a little, in basketball you would call it a crossover, and he just created some space and put in a wonderful cross that I can't remember the name of the player that just completely scuffed it in the box. Jonathan Lewis, yeah, absolutely. And then this weekend, I think it was against Inter Milan, he had another moment where he just kind of just one-twoed it between his feet and just created some space for himself and took a shot. It was not a very good shot, but just like,
I think he wasn't even in the Olympic roster. He came in.
Yeah, you're right.
I forgot.
Yeah, I think Uli got injured, I think, and he came in for him.
Julianis, I think so. Yeah.
He
wasn't even in the roster.
I love his ability to make space for himself.
Just one thing to add too. I don't know if you're going to give your players still, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so give yours, and then I'll mention what I want to talk about in the midfield.
My player is a player that's My player's a player that's already been integrated into the team, but I don't think that we've seen like the full integration of him yet, and that's Gianluca Busio. I think Busio, I believe the Jamaica game was his first World Cup qualifying start, and you saw the team play with him as if it was their first time playing with him. It looked like Tyler Adams and Yunus Musa like just didn't know how to play with a player like Busio. He's so much different than Weston McKennie, and I think if Busio gets a little run of games with these players and they start kind of seeing like how to utilize him, he can become a weapon for this national team, and it'll help us out tremendously moving forward. Like we were talking, we were talking about how you can't do a build-up with Kellen Acosta on the field. Well, what if you do what Venezia often does with Busio, where in the build-up, Kellen Acosta moves up to the 8 and Busio drops in the 6, and he kind of plays that position and brings the ball up the field. And once it gets into the middle third or even the final third, they switch back and Acosta becomes a 6. That changes sort of the dynamic and allows the U.S. to kind of build up a lot more freely. I think Busio was trying to do a little bit of that against Jamaica, and in the second half, we started to actually see it where Adams pushed forward and Busio dropped back. But in the beginning of that game, it was super clumsy, and they really weren't on the same page at all. And I think that a lot of that has to do with just being a player that is still a very new player to the national team, doesn't have that authority to really come in and say, like, give me the ball, I'm going to run the offense today. And as he grows into the team and they get more minutes together, I think that Busio is going to be a lot bigger player for this national team moving forward.
Yeah, and utilizing Busio, what many have to understand here is, and don't get me wrong with this, Busio is not a player that makes it happen, right? He's a player that distributes the game. He'll switch the play, open up space for a creator to come in and create the plays or progress the ball forward. You see that in Venezia a lot, right? He gets the ball, switches the play. All of a sudden, the defense has some holes in it on the half spaces, and someone can come in and progress the ball or do the play. I think it's Amaru that does it for Venezia. Has a killer lefty, that player too. But that's what Busio is. So when you have a midfield with Busio, that's what he's going to provide. And he can do what you said. He can drop back, help on the buildup. And I think he'll adjust. And it was also a 19-year-old starting the first game World Cup qualifying away. So it was expected. And even though people said he was terrible, I don't think he was terrible against.
No, I don't think he was terrible. I think he's just kind of.
Yeah, it just wasn't fantastic.
Yeah.
And also in the goal, I don't know if many people remember, he starts the play there with a quick 1-2, I believe.
Yeah, he did.
He started, so that showed a little bit of his quick thinking that he's learning in the Serie A. He mentioned it in interviews, right, that he doesn't have as much time and space in the Serie A that he had in MLS as a 6. And I keep saying this. The 6th position in MLS is one of the easiest positions to play in MLS. They let you play a lot more than other countries. The 6, they press the heck out of the 6 in other countries. In MLS, that's why Jackson Yo even succeeded, right? He didn't have a good season. Succeeded at the 6 in the past. They give him so much time and space. And you give professional players time and space, they're going to get it done. These guys are all professional players. But before, I don't know if you're going to move on to the forwards, I just want to give an honorable mention in the midfield to Reyna, because
I was about to say that, man. I was about to bring him up.
I think he will be shifted to the 8 eventually, because it seems like that's what Dortmund wants to play him, at the central midfielder, right? It doesn't seem like they're playing him at the wing anymore. At least they didn't before the injury, and I think it's going to keep it that way. So that might get Greg to eventually just, okay, let's put Reyna here and see what he can do. And from what I've seen in Dortmund, he can absolutely play there, and he will succeed there, which some people hate that idea because it kills the MMA midfield. But what everyone has to understand is, if you have to bench Yunus Musa and get Reyna because he's at a higher level, if he is, right, they're going to have to fight it. Why is having a player of the quality of Yunus Musa coming off the bench a bad thing? You need options, right? And again, you can change the playing style. You can shift Reyna wide again and put Yunus Musa in if it's not working. They're also different types of player, right? Both of them. So that's just an honorable mention that I think that could happen. Impact, you mentioned a name that can impact the midfield. Reyna hasn't played there, so if he shifts there, I think he'll be a big difference maker.
Yeah, so many people talk about the game in terms of like best 11s, and it's just so silly because there's like, I don't know of any scenario where you have like a one-off game where you can legitimately play like your best 11 and expect that to get a result in that moment. Like so often it's a In World Cup qualifying, it's a 3-game window or a 2-game window. In the World Cup, it's going to be 3 games plus games, and then you're going to have to be worried about card accumulation and injuries and all these things. I don't know why there's so much hesitation to talk about players other than the MMA midfield that could potentially work, because we're going to need more players. And if Gio Reyna can play that 8, or if he can oscillate and play the 8 and the wing, depending on the scenario, that just gives us another bullet in the gun that we can use to progress and to continue putting out quality lineups as we try to progress as a national team.
Don't you think that maybe it's because American soccer fans grew accustomed to having, so we have a starting 11 that's way above the bench players in the past, right? So you can only have those best guys playing. And it was in the past, it was also a lot easier to determine our best 11. The discussions weren't as big. We would discuss a few things of where to play what, but we knew who the players were. Now it seems like as the quality and depth is growing, there's already meaningful discussions of certain positions, right? Like Reina or Musa. When did we have that discussion in the past, right? Two players that are at that level at age 18 in Europe doing so well. So I think what American soccer fans have to get accustomed to is, as we grow as a soccer country, as we develop more players, as we get more talent, we have to just accept the fact that we will have quality players on the bench, which is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm used to that. I with Brazil, right? You see Brazil, all these Champions League players on the bench, and everyone's just like, yeah, that's what Vinicius Jr. killing in Real
Didn't
Madrid.
even get called up in the
Yeah,
last
they
window,
called him
right?
up when Neymar got injured.
Yeah.
But he's not. It's like, yeah, he's a bench player or not even in the roster, and that's part of it, and that's going to happen. Now, are we at the stage of leaving these players out of the roster or bench? Not yet. We're getting there. We're seeing it. But I think the soccer fan in the U.S. needs to just start embracing it, I would say. Not even accepting it. It's something good. Embracing it. It's like, yeah, we have these players that play at the French league, that play in the Premier League, and yeah, they're going to be at the bench because we have better players. And that's good.
Yeah.
They're going to fight for a spot.
I think a big part of it is the 2-game window in World Cup qualifying. It used to be a 2-game window, and in that scenario, you legitimately could play. You could give your best 11 a lot more minutes. Now that we've moved to a 3-game window, it's a lot more difficult. I think we're about to see in this next window, like I know everybody wants us to come out guns a-blazing against Canada, but if you look at it, we've got 2 home games that we absolutely have to win. That winning those home games is going to essentially qualify us for the World Cup. That Canada game is probably the least important game of that window for us. So, and I'm 100% positive Greg's going to approach it that way. So to have quality backups or quality maybe second best 11 that you can bring in against a Canada team to get a result there, I mean that's like you said, that's what separates the really good teams in the world to the truly great teams in the world that can compete for these international tournaments.
And I don't know who Canada faces, but the U.S. game might also be the least important for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who they face also. I believe I think they play Panama next window. So that is a crucial game. And guys, I might be saying something. I don't know. I didn't check Canada's. I know our schedule. I don't check Canada's schedule.
Yeah, same. I
the
don't
rude
remember.
Canadians, man. They're very rude Canadians.
They're feeling it, man. On top of the group, they're on top of the world right now. It's good for them.
Don't even get me started. I have a podcast with 3 Canadians.
Let's move on to the forward position. Now this is a position where we've got 4 wingers that are playing at a very high level right now. But as we just said, maybe some of the wingers might not necessarily be wingers for very long. And then we have a striker position that has been the basis of conversation for the national team for, I don't know, the last 5-6 years, something like that. We've got a player in Ricardo Pepi that's stepped up and been tremendous, but behind him, we have a lot of players that some have been given opportunities and not done a whole lot with it. Some haven't, maybe not gotten the opportunities that they need. I don't know. Filippo, what player do you think can come into this winger position, or maybe it's a player that we've already seen before that can really have a big impact on it?
So I think one to point out right away, even though I'm not going to say the situation is the same as Tenor Testament because Olympique Marseille has more money than Venezia, but they also don't have enough to just waste money, right? So I think they're invested in Conrad. They spent some cash on him, and I think They're going to continue to play him. He does have a lot to improve in the final third, decision making, the crossing, the when to pass, when to finish. It seems like that's not sharp yet. But at the same time, when you see him play, you see an overly talented player that can beat the man off the dribble, very technical on the ball, very good in tight spaces. So Conrad has been a player that I think can come in and impact right there, right? You have Christian Pulisic. There's no more questioning. He's injury prone, right? He has to change that now. So what if we don't have Pulisic? Who is that player that can beat the man off the dribble? Weah? Absolutely. Who else? It's not Bryan Aronson. That's not Bryan Aronson's game. I think Conrad can be an option right there. And if he continues to develop and play at Ligue 1, and it looks like Olympique Marseille might qualify to the Champions League through the league. So I think he can be a player that can come in and impact. And I personally think if we're all healthy, Conrad is one of our super subs, right? We're having a hard time breaking down a defense, either bunkering or countering. He can be that guy to come off the bench and light up the game, which is what Sampaoli has been using him quite a bit in Marseille, to be fair. I'm going to let you go now with the winger. Then I'll go back to the center forward, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about it a little bit, because the center forward is super tricky.
The center forward is very tricky. Yeah, I think Conrad is like the clear answer there. Another player similar to Aaron Long would be Jordan Morris. He's a player that was a big part of the national team prior to his injury. He was a player that had a lot of goals and assists for the national team prior to his injury. He's coming back. So we'll see how, if Greg chooses to integrate him. He plays a lot differently than a lot of the players that we have right now. He's more of a forward that's playing at the winger position, a player that's going to try to look to get in and finish. He has grown a whole lot in MLS. You see that he's added a lot more assists to his game and a little bit more dynamics to his game. But I don't know that he's necessarily on the same tier as at least the top three guys that we have in Reyna, Weah, and Pulisic. Like, I think they're on a different tier. I know we talked before about Bryan Aronson, that he's a very, very good player, but I don't know that I would put him on the same tier as those other guys. But I think Jordan Morris is a player, especially since we're struggling at the striker position and we're struggling to get goals, that as a player that could potentially come into this lineup and maybe get some run, especially towards the inner qualifying, especially, as you said, if Christian Pulisic still struggles with injuries and Gio Reyna potentially moves into the 8th spot.
Yeah, we got to see how Morris is going to come back from the third knee injury.
Very similar to Aaron Long, yeah.
Worse even, third one, right? Third knee injury. The third, right? I'm not wrong with that, am I?
I'm not sure.
Well, I know for a fact there's two, because he was coming back already before, but I think he's had 3 knee surgeries already. And he's also not a light player. He's a heavy player, not fat. But he's like strong, right? He's like
a Wayne Rooney type.
Yeah, his top half here, he's like a big player. He's heavy. See how he does there. He's also not the most technical player, so he's definitely not going to rely on technical ability. He's been dangerous in transition, physicality. That's what he brings in. So I personally always preferred Jordan Morris over Paul Riola, for example. So if it's between those two, I would like to see.
Yeah, and we've seen how much run Paul Arriola has gotten in the last few months. I would agree that I would have preferred to see Jordan Morris, if he was healthy, over Arriola. So we know that even though we've got this big four that we're all really excited about, we haven't seen them together all that often.
It's just that if it was me personally, obviously depends on how it turns out a year from now when you see how the players are performing, especially when it comes to World Cup, because it's such a short tournament and you only get a chance every 4 years. So you do have to get the best out of it. World Cups, this is one thing that's important to say. World Cups are not for building systems or developing players. World Cups are for you to bring the best you can and perform the best you can, right? It's not for you to, okay, let me try to implement this new system. No, you should have one by then.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to, I'm going to bring this 17-year-old because he's promising. No. You can only bring a 17-year-old if you think he's going to be useful. You have 1 month there in the World Cup, sometimes less if you're knocked out early. So personally, depends on how it goes. My wingers would be Weah, Conrad, Pulisic, and Brendan, right? These would be my 4 wingers. And then, for example, I'd bring maybe Matthew Hoppy up top if he can figure out his situation, right? He has to be playing. Right now, I wouldn't bring him. Right now, I agree with Greg in that sense. He's not playing. He's injured, actually, by the way. So Hoppy, because he can play as a center forward, he can also play as a winger, as we've seen. And then I also would bring Giovanni Reina as one of the midfielders because we know he can also play as a midfielder or as a winger. So that gives you some diversity of options, and you have 4 dangerous wingers right away. I wouldn't personally put Jordan Morris, Areola. I mean, you know my opinion on Areola. So, but the tricky one here, and I want you to go first on this one, is the center forward, because Pepe seems like a lock right now. But what if he gets a transfer
Yeah,
and it goes like Bryan Reynolds? He's not
absolutely.
playing.
Yeah.
It's terrible. What do we do?
Before we get to the striker, let me give you my hot take,
Oh, yeah.
because this is my hottest take that I have in U.S. soccer right now. I gave it on another podcast, but I've
Are
never
you going to
given
get
it on the
hate?
Yank
Are you
Report.
going to get hate on the video for
I'm
it?
probably gonna get hate, man, because this is one of the most beloved players in the national team world, and it's about Matthew Hoppy. My hot take is that Matthew Hoppy is the most overrated player in the pool right now, and the reason for that is people keep talking about him like he's a player that needs to be called up and a player that could like be a big contributor to the national team right now. But he hasn't played at all for a team that's not very good in the Spanish Primera Division. And whenever you look at Matthew Hoppy, I mean, I think people started to fall in love with him whenever he was at Schalke and he got the hat trick and then he got a couple more goals, but then towards the end of the season really fell off. And then in the Gold Cup, he had a few moments where he was really bright and just looked so good and so confident out there and had this like personality and this bravado that like really resonated with the fan base. And we all thought that he was supposed to go to like this big club. There was a big transfer in the works for him. And then what happened? Nothing happened. He goes back to Schalke. He's not practicing with the squad in hopes for a transfer. A transfer doesn't come. A transfer doesn't come. A transfer doesn't come. He starts training with Schalke again. Finally, a transfer comes, and it's not Manchester United. It's not some mid-tier EPL team. It is one of the bottom-tier Spanish teams. And he gets there, and he doesn't even hit the ground running right there. So for me, if this is a player that Greg Berhalter doesn't rate enough to bring into the squad, is a player that got passed over for transfers by just about the entire world and ends up going to like the last club that offers him really close to deadline day. And then that club doesn't play him. At some point, who's right here? Who's Matthew Hoppy? Is Matthew Hoppy the guy who scored the hat trick for Schalke? Is he the guy that was bright in moments in the Gold Cup, or is he the guy that was unable to secure the transfer and then gets to Mallorca and is not playing? So for me, I really need Matthew Hoppy to actually show it at the club level on a consistent basis before I start having him live up to the hype that so many give him in the national team fan base.
Just because people love disagreement, and we finally got something to exchange ideas. So just so I understand, because when someone says overrated, the first thing I want to make clear to everyone, which I believe Sam meant this, when someone calls a player overrated, they're not saying they're bad. They're just saying that people rate him higher
Yes.
than it is.
Yes, exactly.
For example, if people say Matthew Hoppy is world class, I'm going to say you are overrating him. He's not world class, which it's not. It shouldn't even be a debate. So what do you mean by overrated? You think that overrated in the sense that he shouldn't be in the roster right now?
A lot. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people that I talk to say that he should be one of the strikers. He's like high up in the striker depth chart or even in the winger depth chart or something like that. And for me, he's not even in the conversation right now because he just hasn't played in a long time.
So right now he shouldn't be in the roster because he's injured and because of the Mallorca situation as well. I think what happens with Matthew Hoppy is the problem is his agent, in my opinion, right? When he had that moment in Schalke, his contract expired over the summer and then he renewed it, right? He renewed the contract because he wanted the money, right? And I don't blame Matthew for it or his agent for wanting the money, but the smarter move would be he's on the rise, become a free agent, because then he's going to have so many options, because then people will be willing to take a risk on him. They don't want to take a risk of paying 3 or 4 million on a player that you had such a small sample on, right? So with that said, he still managed to get a transfer, which kind of seems like it was more signing in American marketing than the coach wants this guy here, right? It's kind of like looking like that right now. And it looks like he might get a loan in January. So I think a lot of it was mismanagement from the agent. The question we have to ask is this. We gave Ricardo Pepi an opportunity as a center forward, the 18-year-old in MLS that scored 13 goals or 12 this season, something like that. If Hoppy was a center forward in MLS, could he pull up those numbers? I think he would probably fight for it. We don't know, right? Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would. But based on what we saw in Schalke and in Gold Cup, I think if he played as a center forward for most MLS teams, I think he could pull similar numbers. If he can pull similar numbers, I would have liked to have seen Greg try Hoppy at the center forward position, right? And maybe during Schalke, he showed that he's clinical in front of the goal. His goals weren't tap-ins. The goals he scored weren't tap-ins. So that's what I think some people want him there, is because it's not really because of what we've seen. It's more because what we haven't seen, right? We haven't seen him as a center forward for the national team at all, just at the wing. And as much as people think we're kind of thin on the center forward position still. Because
no, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, we just talked about Pepi. He could get a transfer and happen like Reynolds. All of a sudden, you have an 18-year-old that's not in form, not playing. That's going to be your starter. Is that going to work? We already saw Pepi also have ups and downs with the national team, which is very much expected for an 18-year-old. And then who's the backup of Pepi? It's going to be Zardes. Is that who you want to start in the World Cup? Probably not the starter. I don't even want him even on the bench. But if he's on the bench, it's one thing. But if Zardes is your best center forward, it worries me a little bit. DK, that had ups and downs and then finished the season strong with Orlando, but we still know there's a lot of aspects of his game that need improvement. Who else do we have? Sargent, that can't figure it out. They don't even play him as a center forward anymore. I don't know. That's the main reason, and I'm hopeful that Hoppy figures it out, gets a club that he plays, because we are struggling still with that 9 position, right? And I'm not for playing Weah there. I'm not for it.
Yeah, I agree. Now, my counterpoint to that would be, I don't know if Mallorca is a club that's in a position where even if there's issues with the agent and, there's infighting and all that, if Hoppy's a player that's like lighting it up and is like a class player and a cut above in training, are they in a position where they could not play him because they have disputes with him about other things off the field? I don't think so. I think talent wins out most of the time in European soccer, and I don't see the scenario where right now Hoppy's this phenomenal player that's just not getting the run because of club politics. Maybe he gets a move and it works, but I don't know.
I don't think it's politics, but there's not that many players in the world that so Hoppy has a playing style, and sometimes that playing style won't fit certain systems or how a coach envisions the team. Right? Some coaches like Jurgen Klopp, he needs those players that can go gegenpress all game long. I don't personally watch Mallorca, so I don't know if it's something tactical that Hoppy just doesn't fit their system. Or the way.
Did you watch him at Schalke?
I watched him at Schalke, at the Bundesliga. I didn't watch preseason or anything. I watched it in Bundesliga, and he was just playing as a lone center forward for most of the time at Schalke.
Not very involved.
Wouldn't get much service at all. We know how Schalke was last season. It was depressing to watch, to say the least. But he and Schalke, Hoppy was very good when opportunities came to him. He was very efficient, but he struggled with one thing. He struggled at Schalke on creating opportunities for himself and his teammates. When he would get the ball, he was only dangerous when he was put in a dangerous position, and then he was very effective.
I forget the name of the player, phenomenal playmaker for Schalke that's since moved to another club. I forget his name.
I forgot his name too, but he
was
Arit.
I don't remember.
Arit. Anyway. But he was good at that. And then when it was a moment for him to create an opportunity for a teammate or for himself, it just wasn't there. But unlike Gold Cup, which it kind of seemed like he was able to create it for himself and teammates.
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. Like, whenever I look at a striker, I want to see them score goals in a lot of different ways and be involved in the game and impact the game, even whenever they're not necessarily maybe in the box, So whenever I watch Ricardo Pepi, I get so excited with him because you see him winning headers, and you see him hitting nice window passes into space for his teammates, holding up on occasions, and you see him whenever he gets the ball in the box. He's finishing, and not just finishing with like power or accuracy. It's a combination, and he's a very accurate finisher whenever he does it. Whenever it comes to Matthew Hoppy, so many of his goals for Schalke were like carbon copies of one another. He would get this nice ball. He would be playing off the back shoulder of the defense. He would get like a one-on-one with the keeper. and he was able to finish. And his finishing was very, very good. But he had to be put in this position where you just don't get put in that position very much for a striker.
It
He
seemed like
wasn't
Hoppy,
winning headers, he wasn't doing all this other stuff.
it seems like the thing with Hoppy was during the Barcelona academy years, he was an attacking midfielder, right? And then they moved him to a center forward. The thing with him in Schalke that I noticed too is he was very dangerous he would position himself on the half spaces and make some diagonal runs, and then they would find him. He would make those runs, come in on one-on-one situations with the goalkeeper, and then he was highly efficient. That's not how the United States plays. So that is one of the problems, right?
And he's not super fast, is he? Like, he's not like a burner that once he gets that half step, he's gone.
He's kind of fast with the ball. Like with the ball, he's a fast player because I think he's very good at the dribbling. But off the ball, no, he's not the fastest, not the slowest by any means as well. Neither is Pepe. Pepe's not super fast as well. But Hoppy, the United States, we attack a lot through the flanks and we have no creativity through the middle. So those diagonal runs just won't work if there's no one to make the incisive passing, right? I still would like to give him a look on the center forward, but right now at this point, he was put in this situation to center forward. If he can figure that out, we move with him. Otherwise, he has to figure out the club right now.
Yeah, at this point, he's got to get a move in January, and then he's got to hit the ground running with his club, and that seems like a tough road to hoe. My selection for the player that can impact the striker position is a player who's in much better position, probably the player in the best position of all the strikers, and that's Josh Sargent. Like, literally, I mean, Sargent's already getting a ton of minutes in the EPL. Literally, all he has to do is to become semi-competent in front of goal, is to just like get a little bit of confidence and get going. That's it. If he can do that, then his resume is already the best resume for any striker, any American striker out there right now. It seems like it's not a big hurdle for a player that just has so much promise and has shown so much quality in so many different areas, but it's been the same story for like the last 3 seasons with Josh Sargent, and he hasn't quite broken through.
Yeah, mine was Conrad, right? The forwards. Now, I just want to mention on center forward, one player that can have a major impact. Now I'm going to the center forward, right? I already said Conrad for the winger. I'm going to say center forward I do think DK can have a major impact. And the thing is, he is probably going to stay in Orlando. That's just one thing to make clear. Orlando released Nani, lost Chris Mueller. They're going to have to keep someone, right, in the team. So I think DK will stay in Orlando, and we know what his game is. And he is a player different from the other players in our poll, right? Makes some good diagonal runs as well. Physicality, brings something different. So I don't think DK will be a starter. I'm almost 100% sure he won't be a starter for the U.S. men's national team in the World Cup. But off the bench as an option, if we're going to keep chugging in crosses like we do all the time, he is a very good option for that specifically. He's a smart player in the box. He can push players around, and he's shown he can finish in the box. When he's in the box, close range, he's pretty effective. So I think in the center forward, he's a player that could be key for us. But I think the chance of him starting is minimal to zero.
Well, whenever you look at like CONCACAF away games, I mean, especially the last game against Jamaica, where we brought in Jesus Ferreira at the end of the game. Like, he's just not a physical striker that's going to go up and win balls and win headers. Daryl DK in that situation, you feel a whole lot more confident with in that exact situation. That's where I see him as being a big contributor.
Also, you want a player that bodies other players, right? I don't mean like injuring, but if you hit a player, you kind of hurt them a little bit, get them a little scared. You need a player that does that in your team. And we don't have many, right? A lot of our players are more like agile, quick players. We don't have many big players. Daryl DK is one of them. Besides our defense, right? Defense, we do have a big physical presence on defense. But when you go like our fullbacks, Dest, not a physical player. Reina, Pulisic, even Pepe, he's not really the most physical player. Even Tim Weah, too. They're not the most physical presence. Even Tyler Adams, for a 6, he's not a big 6. Right, you get like Brazil with Casemiro there. It's a big presence.
Weston's pretty big. Weston's a big guy.
Yeah,
maybe Tanner Tessman potentially. He's like 6'4". He's massive. Yeah.
Tanner Tessman, Busio's not big, but yeah, my pick there would be Conrad for the wing and Daryl DK on the center forward.
Let me ask you about
no bias.
Let me ask you about some dual internationals, man. Do you think there's any chance that like Malik Sanogo or Valerian Balogun comes in and impacts this position?
So Sonogo's too young.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll have time to, because look, for Sonogo to get called in, there's a lot of things that he has to play in Bundesliga and he has to be scoring. What are the odds of him doing that, right? We see Yusuf Mukoko for Dortmund. He was the superstar at that
Yeah.
age group, comes in and is struggling at that age. So Sonogo might be too young for 2022, maybe 2026, maybe, but 2022 too young. And we also need to win the dual national battle, right? I don't know if he'll be ready to commit right away. Balogun is a tricky one because he got opportunities with Arsenal early in the season, the Premier League, and I watched those games and because I was excited for it, and he didn't look good. The opportunities were there, and they're going to say, "Oh, Arsenal's crap." Arsenal's not as bad as people think they are. They just became a meme club, but the team's not that bad. They created chances. The
Yeah,
ball got to
they're
Balogun.
pretty high up in the EPL table right now.
I think they're fifth, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're not a bad team, and he didn't do it. And then he goes back to the U23, and then he has, I think, 14 goals in 10 games. So he's in a situation where he's definitely too good for the U23s. And to be fair, when you're a 20-year-old, you shouldn't be in the U23s if you're good. You should be in the senior level. He's 20. He's not 18.
Yeah.
He's 20. So he's too good for the U23s as expected. Not good enough for the Premier League, apparently, at least with Arsenal. Balogun has to play senior, he has to play senior soccer somewhere to be considered. And yeah, then there's also Alex Maitin, which apparently we're going to get him as well. But also he's in the winger, so he's going to have to compete with a lot of quality players.
Yeah.
But Balogun, I have no opinion on Balogun until I see him perform at a senior level. And I think we share the same opinion as many fans in regard. Some people are overly excited about Balogun. I'm not going to get overly excited for a guy scoring goals on the U23 level.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think that there's a world where maybe Balogun gets a loan out or something like that and starts bagging goals. And, we're getting closer to the World Cup and we still haven't had a second striker step up. And Greg says, hey, man, if you want to come, you can go to the World Cup. And that's a pretty big carrot on that stick. So that's potentially out there for the U.S. to land Balogun. But, that's a lot of ifs. And, we've been saying a lot of ifs about a lot of players. Some other players I think worth mentioning, Kaden Clark is about to get that move to Leipzig.
Maybe.
I think in order for Kaden Clark to make it to the national team, depending on whether he's being deployed as an 8 or if he's deployed as a winger or whatever he's going to be. I think he's going to have to hit the ground running with his club because, like we said, with a lot of players, he just doesn't have a lot of time to establish himself. I know that there's questions. I know you've been covering this pretty closely. He may not necessarily be playing with Leipzig.
Yeah.
Chances are he's going to get a loan.
Right now, the information we have now is Kaden will go to Leipzig in January, apparently train for 2 weeks, and then Jesse and the coaching staff will observe. If they feel like he's not going to play, there's loans being considered, and one of them is going back to the New York Red Bulls. That is one, but it seems like it might be unlikely. PSV has shown real interest on a loan. RB Salzburg is always an option because it's a brother club, right, or sister club. So it could happen that he'll get a loan. But regardless, wherever he lands, he has to come in hot if he wants to make it to the World Cup.
But that being said, like we talked about that 8 position, especially if he ends up at an 8, I mean, there's opportunity there to earn a spot on this national team at the 8 position. So if he does hit the ground running, he has every opportunity to come in, especially considering it's very likely at this point that he's going to be a member of that December camp.
He needs to perform in the December camp and impress Greg as well there.
Yeah.
If you can impress Greg there, it might open Greg's eyes to like, hey, this kid is special. I'm going to bring him in. Because the thing with Greg is, too, as much as we say he's slow on changing and reacting, he is looking forward to the World Cup. Right? He obviously now his goal is just qualify first, but he could project that, say, hey, this kid is very good and he's going to go play there. I think he needs to have some vision, and then he's like, I'm going to integrate him now.
The door's open for him. It's the same situation like we were talking about with Tanner Tessman. If you can get a run where you're starting a bunch of games over in Europe, then your resume is going to be good enough to qualify you for that 8 position. A lot of big ifs there. Another player that I'm excited about, but I think it's a similar situation to maybe a Malik Sanogo, where I don't think he has enough time right now, is Paxon Aronson.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on Paxon Aronson and his potential to contribute contribute to this national team in this window?
He's a very technical player, quite impressive, more technical than his brother, surprisingly, already at his age. And he still seems like a kid, right? He's still growing. And I personally think his ceiling is higher than Brenden Aronson, but he's a different player, right? He seems to thrive more on a central role, while Brenden Aronson seems to thrive more currently playing out wide. Less of a player that relies on work rate and more of a player that's good on the ball, creative, technical, good on dribbling, better on finishing than Brenden, by the way. Brenden worked on that during his years in Philly and improved, while Paxton, it just seems more natural to him, the finishing ability. So will he have time? It's what you said. The time might not be his friend right now for 2022. He would have to be, like, even if he balls out in Philadelphia, right, it still might be tough for him to make the roster, even if he's – so it would require him having a breakout season in Philly, which he probably will still be in Philly next season. There's too many – I don't see –
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I don't think that he's going to be there in time, but I do think that he's going to be a player once we get past the World Cup and we're looking towards 2026. That he'll be a player that's looked to be integrated there, especially whenever we have players like Sebastian Lletget, who's going to be probably not part of the 2026 World Cup movement. He'll probably be on the outs at that point.
He won't be on the 2022. I'm saying this right now.
So many people have said that Sebastian Lletget is like an absolute lock for the 2022 World Cup, and I've been saying, like, I just don't know if that's true, man. Like, we've talked about a few players that are in position to come in and take that spot. I don't know that Sebastian Lletget is a lock for the 2022 World Cup.
I think he's a lock to not be there. I'm putting this take here right now. It's recorded right. I actually said this, I think, in March. On a video with Pete that we were doing some type of roster prediction for the World Cup or something. And I keep saying every time we do that roster, I say, I don't think Lletget will be there. And I'm saying it again, I don't think Sebastian Lletget will be in the World Cup. One player that I think that is controversial, I think Paul Riola might be there. That one I still think is open. Not that I want it, but I think it'll happen. Lletget, I think he won't be there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because a lot of the players that we were talking about who are on the bubble, Sebastian Lletget, DeAndre Yedlin, Kellen Acosta, maybe even John Brooks, are players that are the veterans in this squad. So does Greg Berhalter, how much does he value like having a veteran presence? Is he okay with bringing a legitimate U23 team to the World Cup, or is he going to have maybe DeAndre Yedlin or maybe Sebastian Lletget or just somebody who's an older head in this group that's going to get there, even though there might be a better player that could potentially take that position?
I just think there's a lot going on in his position that will just push him out. I think one that we mentioned was Reyna. Reyna being pushed central takes one spot away. We never know. Maybe Luca De La Torre gets a move and then he performs in a better league. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this guy's performing in a better league. Now it's worth the consideration. There's other players thriving also at Lletget's position that can play there, like Jordi Mihailovic this season also.
It's a player we didn't talk about at all, but yeah, he's had a fantastic seation this year.
So I think what's happening with Lletget is he fell off quite a bit, right? He kind of is performing the same way I've always seen him, but I think he fell off on a lot of people's eyes now because he had weaker performances and he stopped scoring because he only scores in friendlies most of the time. And there's players emerging in that position, so that doesn't help his case. Unlike, for example, the left back that we talked about, there's no one emerging, so Anthony Robinson can continue to have weak performances. He's going to continue to be there because there's no options, even though I still think Anthony Robinson is levels above what we're talking about here. So I think Lletget has that problem of players that are showing up as well.
Yeah, and I think to wrap this up, a point that I want to make here is kind of what we're getting at is that it's getting more and more difficult to make it onto this national team squad. A few months ago, we were kind of just throwing things at the wall, just trying to see what would stick. And at this point, we've got a base of 15 guys or so, something like that, that look like really strong candidates and have performed strongly on the field when they're together. And it's getting more and more difficult to make it in these spots. We talk about like Paxon Aronson, and to compare Paxon Aronson with his brother, Brenden Aronson, who Brenden Aronson was able to come into this squad because we had this youth movement and we basically got rid of pretty much all the veterans that were a part of the previous World Cup. So maybe Bryan Aronson wasn't necessarily ready to come into the national team. And if you remember, Brennan's first few performances with the national team were not that strong. He got better and better as more opportunities came to him. But at this point, he's a strong contributor. But Paxon Aronson is not going to have those same opportunities. Paxon Aronson is going to have to really earn it in order to be a part of the group.
Brendan thrived, I believe, was in the first World Cup qualifying camp because Pulisic was injured or had COVID. And
I remember the game against Switzerland, he looked really good.
But then he didn't play at Nations League at all, did he? I don't remember.
Did he? I thought he did. I think he did.
I think he did, yeah.
Remember.
But I think the first time I remember Brendan actually was like, okay, this guy, because people even started to say Brendan should start over Pulisic, which was crazy to hear from me.
Yeah.
But it was in September camp because Pulisic was out sick in the first games, and then he got injured also. Brendan came in. He had strong performances, especially against Honduras when he came in, or he started. I can't remember now.
But Brennan's first starts with the national team was whenever he was still with the Union.
It was in January, right? January?
I don't recall. You might be right, but he seems like he kind of leveled up once he got to Salzburg, and he also, I think, initially with the national team he was playing more centrally. Whenever he got put out on the wing, it helped him out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the big point I'm trying to make here is that the national team that Bryan Aronson was able to come into is not nearly the same as the national team that Paxon Aronson is going to have to break into, and that's only like a couple years apart, but in order for these new guys, these Kaden Clarks and Paxon Aronsons and whoever else, you have to be playing at a very high level in order to even break into this national team. Mm-hmm. So things are looking very good. I know we both agree that things are looking very good for qualifying, that we're probably going to make it. And I think that by the time we actually get to the World Cup, it's going to be a very strong group of players that are going to have every opportunity in the world to put together the best World Cup that we've ever seen from an American national team.
Live or die by Greg. We'll see what Greg does. There's times I get excited with what Greg does. There's times I just want to punch myself in the face when I see what Greg does. So we'll see what Greg does. And the talent is there. It's just whether he can maximize the potential out of it. So hopefully he does by then.
Filippo, tactical manager, thank you so much for coming on the Yank Report with me today. Give everybody an update on your progress returning from injury. Who is going to return to the field quicker, you or Gio Reyna?
I don't know. Greg gave me a call. He said he's looking forward to having me in the January camp. He called me to check in. How's the progress? I'm going to be able to put my foot on the ground December 30th. And then I'll try to get informed. I told Greg I can't promise. I said I'll be good for the March camp for him, which he said he expects me to start at the Azteca. He thinks I can bring a very good anti-L3 sentiment to the squad, and I think L3 will focus too much on me, and then we'll be able to pull off a goal.
You have that stuff you were talking about earlier, the Brazilian thing. What'd you say,
Malandro, the malandro,
yeah. That's what you're bringing to the squad.
So he's going to bring me in there to distract L3, and that way Pulisic and Reyna can thrive and win at Azteca. So essentially that's it. Hopefully, I hope Gio Reyna comes back before I do.
Guys, I'm sure everybody out there already knows Filippo and Tactical Manager, but if you don't already, he puts out so much content for the U.S. men's national team and other soccer stuff. And generally, he has a podcast. Actually, tell everybody about the podcast that you just started.
So the podcast is just, it's called Unsackable Podcast. Adrian from Rabona TV on YouTube, a great YouTube channel, by the way. I love it. I was, before I even started the YouTube channel, I think you too, I think you were a viewer too, right? That you told me one.
Yeah,
we were a viewer of his channel. He covers world soccer. Josh from JDD TV, which is the Canadian channel, and Manuel Veth from Transfer Market, which went trending on Twitter for a terrible take, which I called him out on the last podcast.
He's a villain in world soccer right now.
We got into an argument about it because I don't agree with him on that one, on the World Cup qualifying. So we started the pod. They invited me. I started the podcast with them, and it's just a very broad podcast. We'll talk about Champions League. We'll talk about the Libertadores. We'll talk about CONCACAF. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that was, at least me, I was like, in the channel here, I love a lot about soccer. But in the channel, you do that too. We just cover USA, MLS, USMNT. I'm like, I kind of want to talk about some other stuff too. And the podcast was a great way for me to just be able to talk about other things.
So follow Filippo's new podcast, follow his YouTube channel, follow his Twitter, his Instagram, follow his dog's Twitter account.
Or don't. Just follow Tactical Dog, man. Tactical Dog.
Filippo, thank you so much for coming on today. My name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.